The scissors felt heavier than they should have. I stood in front of City Hall cameras, flashing, strangers applauding, waiting for me to cut the ribbon. My name echoed through the loudspeakers like I belonged here. But all I could hear was my son's voice from 3 nights ago. "Mom, you're too old to matter anymore." My fingers trembled. Not from age, but from something deeper. Because if he was right, then why was an entire city standing here waiting for me? And what did they know that my own son didn't? Before I cut that ribbon, I need to tell you how I got here. If this story touches something in your heart, go ahead and like this video, and maybe subscribe if you've ever felt invisible too. And tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I'd really love to know. I'm not alone. If you had asked me 5 years ago who I was, I would have answered without hesitation. I'm a librarian. I would have said with a quiet kind of pride. Not just any librarian. I worked at the Oak Ridge Public Library for 30 years. I knew every shelf, every creaky floorboard, every regular who came in like clockwork. I knew which kids needed help with homework, which seniors came just to feel less alone, and which books had the power to change someone's life if they just gave them a chance. Back then, I mattered. At least I thought I did. Now, at 67, my mornings were painfully quiet. I woke up before the sun, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my body hadn't quite accepted that I no longer had a schedule. I would sit at the small kitchen table Daniel had built with his own hands, sipping coffee that always tasted just a little too bitter, staring at the empty chair across from me. It had been 8 years since my husband passed. 8 years since laughter filled this house. 8 years since someone looked at me like I was still important. I tried to keep myself busy. I really did. I joined a book club at the community center, but most of the women there were newer to town. Kind, yes, but not mine. Not the kind of people who remembered me before my hair turned gray, before my hands started trembling just a little when I held a pen. Sometimes I would walk past the old library building. They renovated it 2 years ago. Modern glass windows, bright lighting, self-checkout machines. Efficient, clean, cold. No one there knew my name anymore, and I never went inside. Because there's a special kind of heartbreak in standing in a place where you once belonged and realizing you've been quietly replaced. Ethan used to understand that. When he was little, he practically grew up in that library. I used to bring him with me during summer breaks, setting him up with coloring books behind the front desk while I worked. He would toddle between the aisles asking endless questions. "Mom, why do people read sad books, Mom? How do you know which story is your favorite?" "Mom, do books ever get lonely?" I used to laugh at that one. "No, sweetheart," I'd say. "Books don't get lonely. People do." He would look at me confused, then shrug it off and run toward the children's section. Back then, he would reach for my hand without thinking. Back then, I was his whole world. Somewhere along the way, that changed. I don't think it happened all at once. It never does. It started small. Missed phone calls that weren't returned. Shorter visits, less eye contact. Then came the excuses. "Work's been crazy, Mom. I'll call you back later. We'll come by next weekend." And eventually, even those stopped. Now when my phone rang, it usually wasn't Ethan. It was a telemarketer, or the pharmacy reminding me to refill a prescription, or silence. The kind of silence that sits heavy in your chest. Ethan lived just 20 minutes away, but sometimes it felt like he was in another state, another world, a world where I no longer fit. Rachel, his wife, was always polite, gentle even. She would hug me when I came over, ask how I was doing, offer me tea. But there was a distance in her eyes, like she wasn't quite sure how to connect with me. Or maybe she just didn't know how to bridge the gap Ethan had built. I never blamed her. It's hard to step into a relationship that's already fraying. Still, there were moments, small ones, when I felt like she saw me, really saw me. Like the time she asked about my old job and actually listened. Not the polite kind of listening, but the kind where your eyes stay locked on the person, where your questions dig a little deeper. What was your favorite part, she had asked. I remember pausing. No one had asked me that in years, helping people find something they didn't even know they were looking for. I said softly. She smiled at that, and for just a second, I felt like myself again. But those moments were rare. Most days, I was just there. A presence, a responsibility, a reminder of something Ethan didn't want to think about. Aging, time, mortality. I think to him, I had become a symbol of all the things he couldn't control. And instead of facing that, he pulled away. It's easier to distance yourself from something uncomfortable than to sit with it. I understood that. I just didn't expect it to hurt this much. The house I lived in had once been filled with noise, Ethan's laughter echoing down the hallway. Daniel humming while he fixed something in the garage, music playing from the radio in the kitchen while I cooked dinner. Now the loudest sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Sometimes I would leave the TV on just to fill the silence, not because I was watching anything, just because I needed to feel like there was still life around me. It's strange how quickly a person can go from being needed to being optional, from being at the center of someone's world to the edge of it, and then slowly to nowhere at all. I didn't notice the exact moment it happened, the moment I stopped mattering, but I felt it, in the way Ethan spoke to me, in the way he avoided my eyes, in the way he sighed just slightly whenever I asked a question, like I was taking up too much space, like my existence required effort, like I was inconvenient. And the worst part, a small, quiet voice inside me started to believe him. Maybe I was too old. Maybe I was out of place. Maybe my time had passed and I just hadn't realized it yet. Maybe the world had moved on and I was still standing in the same spot wondering why everything felt so different. I remember one afternoon sitting by the window watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes down the street. Their laughter carried on the wind light and carefree. I smiled at first, then without warning, tears filled my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because I suddenly felt invisible. Like I could disappear from that moment, from that street, from that entire world, and nothing would change. No one would notice. No one would stop. No one would say, wait, where did Faith go? That thought stayed with me. Quiet, persistent. And then 3 nights ago, Ethan said it out loud. What I had been too afraid to admit to myself. You're too old to matter anymore. Hearing it, it did something to me. Not just pain, something deeper. Something that cracked open a part of me I didn't even realize was still holding on. Because the truth is, I didn't just lose my place in the world. I lost my place in my own son's heart. And I didn't know how to get it back. Or if I even could. But what I didn't know then was that the world hadn't forgotten me. Not entirely, not yet. And in just a few days, everything I believed about my worth was about to be turned upside down. 3 nights ago, I sat at Ethan's dining table staring at a plate of food I couldn't taste. Rachel had cooked roasted chicken green beans, mashed potatoes. It smelled warm, comforting, like the kind of meal that used to bring a family together. But nothing about that evening felt warm. Ethan barely looked at me when I walked in. He gave me a quick hug-on of those half-hearted ones, where his body leaned in but his arms didn't fully follow through. "Hey, Mom," he said, already turning back toward his phone. I smiled anyway. "Hi, sweetheart." I always smiled first. I always tried. We sat down to eat, the three of us, but conversation didn't come easily. Rachel made an effort asking me about my week, about the book I was reading, but Ethan stayed quiet, scrolling, nodding occasionally like he was only half there. I noticed everything. The way he sighed when I spoke a little too long. The way he checked the time. The way his eyes drifted away before I finished a sentence. It's strange how you can feel like a burden without anyone actually saying the word. At least, not at first. Halfway through dinner, Ethan set his fork down with a soft clink against the plate. That sound, it cut through the room like something sharp. "Mom," he said. Just that one word, and something in his tone made my chest tighten. "Yes," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." Rachel glanced at him just briefly. There was something in her expression, something uneasy, but she didn't say anything. I felt it then, that quiet shift in the air, like something was about to break. "Okay," I said. Ethan took a breath. "You've been living in that house alone for years now." I nodded slowly. "Yes, it's not practical anymore." The word practical hung there heavy and cold. "I managed just fine," I said gently. He shook his head. "No, Mom. You think you do. But what happens if something goes wrong? What if you fall? What if you get sick and no one's there?" "I would call you," I replied, forcing a small smile. That was a mistake, because he didn't smile back. Instead, he let out a short laugh, dry, humorless. "That's exactly the problem." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward now, his voice tightening. "I mean, I can't be your safety net forever." The words landed harder than I expected. "I'm not asking you to be," I said quickly. "I've never asked, but you are." "Mom," he cut in. His voice was sharper now, louder. "You just don't realize it." Rachel shifted in her seat. "Ethan." "No, let me finish," he said, not even looking at her. He turned back to me, his expression firm. "You're getting older. Things are going to change whether you like it or not. And we need to start thinking about what's best." My hands tightened around my fork. "What's best for who?" I asked quietly. "For everyone," he said. There it was again. That word. Practical. Efficient. Clean. Cold. He continued, his tone more controlled now, like he had rehearsed this. "You could sell the house. It's worth a lot now. Move into a retirement community, somewhere with support with people your age. It would be safer, easier for him." I could feel something rising in my chest, something fragile, something desperate. "I like my home," I said softly. "Your father built that kitchen table. Every room, every corner, it's filled with memories." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Memories don't pay bills, Mom. That one hurt." I swallowed hard. "I'm not struggling financially." "You will be," he said almost immediately. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. And when that happens, it's going to fall on me." I stared at him. My son? The little boy who once asked if books got lonely. The boy who used to run into my arms without hesitation. Now sitting across from me, talking about me like I was a problem to solve. "I never wanted to be a burden," I whispered. He rubbed his forehead, frustrated. "That's not what I'm saying. It feels like it," I said. Silence fell over the table. Rachel looked between us, her eyes soft but tense. "Faith," she said gently. "I think Ethan just means—" "I mean," Ethan interrupted again, his voice suddenly harder, "that we have to face reality." I felt my heart start to pound. What reality? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second I thought maybe I saw something there. Hesitation. Regret. But it vanished just as quickly. "Mom," he said slowly, "you're not contributing anymore." The room went still. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. "I'm sorry," I said barely above a whisper. "What?" He didn't back down. "You're retired. You don't work. You don't really do anything. You're just there." Just there. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. "I raised you," I said, my voice trembling. "I supported your father. I worked for 30 years. I gave everything to this family." "And I appreciate that," he said quickly, almost defensively. "I do, but that was before. Things are different now." Different? Yes, they were, because now I wasn't needed. Now I wasn't useful. Now I was replaceable. "And what exactly are you saying, Ethan?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. He hesitated. Just for a second. And in that second, I hoped he would stop. That he would take it back. That he would see me. But he didn't. He leaned forward, his expression firm, final. "I'm saying you're too old to matter anymore." The words hit me like something physical, sharp, sudden, unforgiving. Rachel gasped softly. "Ethan?" But it was too late. The damage was already done. I sat there frozen, my mind struggling to catch up with what I had just heard. Too old to matter. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a piece of glass breaking deep beneath the surface. "I see," I said finally. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded distant, flat. I pushed my chair back slowly, my hands trembling just enough that I had to steady myself on the table. "Faith, please," Rachel started, but I shook my head. "It's okay," I said. I forced a smile, the kind you wear when you don't want anyone to see how badly you're hurting. "Thank you for dinner." Ethan didn't stop me. That was the part that hurt the most. He didn't reach for me, didn't call my name, didn't say, "Mom, wait." He just sat there, watching me leave. And in that moment, I realized something that terrified me more than his words. It wasn't just that my son thought I didn't matter. It was that he truly believed it, and a small, broken part of me was starting to believe it too. I didn't cry until I got home. Not in the car. Not while I was driving past the familiar streets that once felt like mine. Not even when I walked through the front door and the house greeted me with its usual hollow silence. No. I held it together until I reached the kitchen, until I saw the table, Daniel's table. My hand slid along its edge, fingers tracing the small imperfections in the wood. The tiny dent near the corner where Ethan had once dropped a toy truck. The faint scratch where Daniel's wedding ring used to tap whenever he laughed too hard. Memories lived in that table. Real ones. Not impractical ones. I pulled out a chair slowly and sat down the same seat I had taken every morning for years. My coffee mug was still there from earlier that day, a faint ring left behind on the surface. And then it happened. The tears came. Not gentle ones. Not the quiet kind that slip down your face unnoticed. These were heavy, sudden, like something inside me had finally given up trying to stay strong. "You're too old to matter anymore." I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to stop the sound that escaped me, but it didn't work. Because it wasn't just what Ethan had said. It was the truth I had been afraid of. The truth that had been creeping in quietly for years. The truth that maybe, just maybe, I had already faded from the world without realizing it. I sat there for a long time, long enough for the room to grow darker as the sun slipped away outside. Long enough for the clock on the wall to tick through an entire hour, maybe more. And somewhere in that silence, my mind drifted. Back to a time when I didn't feel like this. Back to a version of myself I barely recognized anymore. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was standing in the old library again. Not the new one, with the glass walls and machines. The real one. The one that smelled like paper and dust and possibility. The one where every corner held a story waiting to be discovered. I could see it so clearly. The front desk, where I used to stand greeting people as they walked in. The children's section filled with bright colors and laughter. The quiet reading area where the sunlight filtered through tall windows warming the wooden tables. That place had been more than just a job. It had been a purpose. People used to come to me for help, not because they had to, but because they trusted me. Faith, can you help me find something for my daughter? She's been having a hard time lately. Faith, I need a book on starting over. Do you have anything like that? Faith, do you remember that novel you recommended years ago? I think I need it again. I used to know exactly what to say, exactly what to give them, because I understood something that not everyone did, that people weren't just looking for books, they were looking for pieces of themselves. And for 30 years, I helped them find it. But there was something else, something I hadn't thought about in a long time, something deeper than the daily routine of shelving books and helping visitors. A project, a dream. It started small, just an idea scribbled on a piece of paper during my lunch break. I remember the exact moment. There was a little boy no older than 7, sitting in the corner of the library, flipping through a book he clearly didn't understand. His mother sat nearby, exhausted, trying to fill out paperwork. He looked lost, not just confused, lost. And across the room, an elderly man sat alone, staring out the window. He came in every day, never checked out a book, never spoke to anyone, just sat there. 2 different people, 2 different stages of life, but the same kind of loneliness, and something inside me clicked. What if there was a place? Not just a library, not just a building filled with books, but a space where people, young and old, could come together, learn from each other, support each other, feel seen. I started writing that day, page after page. Ideas, plans, sketches. A community center. A place with reading rooms, activity spaces, mentorship programs. Children learning from seniors. Seniors finding purpose again. A bridge between generations. It felt right. It felt important. I spent months working on it, staying late after closing hours, refining every detail. Researching funding options, outlining programs, building something that felt real. Daniel was the only one who knew. He would sit across from me at this very table, reading through my notes, asking questions, offering suggestions. "You've got something here, Faith," he told me once, his eyes full of quiet certainty. "You really think so?" I asked. "I know so." I smiled at the memory. Because he always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Eventually, I gathered the courage to present the proposal to the city council. I remember how nervous I was, my hands shaking as I held the folder, my voice trembling as I spoke. But I believed in it. I believed in what it could become. For a moment, I thought they did too. They listened, they nodded, they asked questions. And when I left that room, I allowed myself to hope. But hope can be fragile. A week later, I received the letter. "After careful consideration, we regret to inform you." I didn't need to read the rest. It was over, just like that. All those months, all that effort, all that belief. Gone. I remember sitting at this same table, staring at that letter, feeling something inside me quietly collapse. Daniel tried to comfort me. "They're wrong," he said. "They just don't see it yet." But I didn't have the strength to keep fighting. Life got busy. Ethan needed me. Bills needed to be paid. Responsibilities piled up. And slowly, that dream faded. Not completely, but enough that I stopped talking about it, stopped thinking about it, stopped believing it mattered. I never told Ethan, not once. To him, I was just a librarian, a mother, nothing more. And maybe that was my fault, because I had hidden that part of myself away for so long, that eventually, even I forgot it existed. I opened my eyes. The kitchen was dark now. Only the faint glow of the streetlight outside filtered through the window. "You're too old to matter anymore." The words echoed again, but this time something felt different. Because for the first time in a long time, I remembered a version of myself who did matter. A version of myself who had ideas, who had purpose, who had something to offer the world. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely gone. I looked down at the table, my fingers resting on the worn wood. And for the first time since that dinner, I didn't feel entirely broken. Just forgotten. And there's a difference, because broken things can't be fixed. But forgotten things, sometimes, they just need to be found again. What I didn't know then was that someone else had never forgotten. Not my work, not my dream, not me. The letter arrived the next morning. It was tucked neatly between a grocery flyer and a bill I had already been expecting. Nothing about it stood out at first, just a plain white envelope, the kind you could easily overlook. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the weight of it, or maybe it was the return address, City of Oak Ridge. My fingers stilled. For a moment, I just stood there by the front door, holding it, staring at those words like they might disappear if I blinked. The city hadn't contacted me in years. Not since I retired. Not since that letter all those years ago. I carried the envelope slowly into the kitchen, my heart beating just a little faster than usual. I sat down at the table, the same table where I had cried the night before, and ran my thumb along the edge of the paper. "This is probably nothing," I murmured to myself. "A mistake, a form letter, a reminder about something I had forgotten." Still, my hands felt strangely unsteady as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Formal, clean, official. I began to read. "Dear Mrs. Faith Morrison." I stopped. They used my full name. Not resident, not homeowner, not something generic. They knew who I was. I kept reading, my eyes scanning faster now. "It is our honor to invite you to attend the grand opening ceremony of the Oak Ridge Community Center." I blinked. The Oak Ridge Community Center. The name felt familiar, too familiar, in recognition of your foundational contribution and early vision that helped shape this project. My breath caught. I read that line again, and again. Your foundational contribution, no. That couldn't be right. There had to be some kind of mistake. I skipped ahead, my eyes racing down the page. "The ceremony will take place this Saturday at 10 a.m. at the newly completed facility located on East Maple Street, East Maple Street." I knew that street. It was only a few blocks from where the old library used to stand. We would be honored by your presence. At the bottom of the letter was a signature, Mayor Thomas Collins, and beneath it, in smaller print, Department of Urban Development, Howard Green. I lowered the paper slowly, my mind struggling to process what I had just read. Recognition, contribution, vision. They were talking about me. But how? Why now? After all these years, I shook my head, letting out a small, disbelieving laugh. No, this isn't right. I read the letter again, from the beginning, slower this time, searching for any sign that it wasn't meant for me. But there it was, clear as day. Faith Morrison. My name, not someone else's, not a typo, mine. I leaned back in my chair, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. The room felt different somehow, like the air had shifted, like something long buried had just been stirred awake. My eyes drifted to the window, to the quiet street outside. Everything looked the same houses, the same trees, the same stillness. And yet something inside me had changed. A question began to form, soft at first, then louder, more insistent. What if this isn't a mistake? I shook my head again, more firmly this time. No, I said aloud. It has to be, because the alternative didn't make sense. Why would the city remember me now? Why would they connect me to something like this? My proposal had been rejected. I had seen the letter. I had lived through that disappointment. There was no version of that story where I became important. And yet, the words were right there. In recognition of your foundational contribution, I folded the paper carefully and placed it back on the table. Then I stood up and walked to the sink, gripping the edge of the counter as I tried to steady myself. My reflection stared back at me from the small window above it. An older woman, gray hair pulled back, lines etched gently across her face, eyes that had seen a lot and recently had cried too much. You're too old to matter anymore. Ethan's voice echoed again, but this time it didn't land the same way, because now there was something else. Something new, something uncertain, a possibility. I turned away from the sink and walked back to the table, picking up the letter once more. Saturday, 10 a.m., 2 days from now. I imagined myself there, standing among strangers, showing up only to be told there had been a mistake, that I wasn't the person they thought I was, that I didn't belong. The thought made my stomach tighten. I could already hear Ethan's voice. I told you, Mom. It's probably nothing. Don't embarrass yourself. I closed my eyes. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was nothing. But then, another thought crept in. Quiet. Stubborn. What if it isn't? What if just this once, something unexpected was actually meant for me? I opened my eyes again, looking down at the letter. My name, printed clearly, deliberately, not forgotten, not erased, recognized. I sat there for a long time, going back and forth in my mind, fear pulling me one way, curiosity pulling me another, and underneath it all, something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Small, fragile, but there. I thought about the version of myself I had remembered the night before, the woman who had believed in something bigger, who had dared to imagine a place where people could feel seen. That woman wouldn't have ignored this. She would have gone, even if it meant risking disappointment, even if it meant standing alone. because some chances don't come twice. I took a slow breath, then another, and finally, I whispered the words out loud. I'll go. It sounded strange, uncertain, but real. I would go, even if it was nothing, even if I ended up standing there feeling foolish, even if Ethan was right, because deep down I needed to know. I folded the letter once more, this time more carefully, and placed it in the drawer beside the table. Not hidden, just safe. As I closed the drawer, my hand lingered on the handle. Saturday, 2 days. For the first time in a long time, I had somewhere to be. And I didn't know whether to be afraid. As I closed the drawer, my hand lingered on the handle. Saturday, 2 days. For the first time in a long time, I had somewhere to be. And I didn't know whether to be afraid or hopeful. I didn't plan on telling Ethan. Not at first. I told myself I would go quietly attend the event, figure out what it all meant, and only then decide whether it was worth mentioning. But the truth is, keeping things from your own child doesn't come naturally, even when that child has hurt you, especially then. So, the next afternoon, after pacing around my kitchen for nearly an hour, I picked up the phone and called him. It rang 4 times before he answered. "Hey, Mom," he said, distracted like he was doing something else at the same time. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied, automatically softening my voice. There was a pause. "Everything okay?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes, to pretend this was just another routine call, another harmless check-in. But something in me, the same small, stubborn part that had decided to go to the event, pushed forward. I received a letter yesterday," I said. "Oh," he replied. "What kind of letter?" "From the city," I added. That got his attention. "The city," he repeated, about what I swallowed. "They're opening a new community center on East Maple Street this Saturday." "Okay," he said slowly. And they invited me." There was silence on the other end, longer than I expected. "Invited you," he said finally, his tone shifting slightly. Why, I took a breath. They said it was in recognition of my contribution, my early vision for the project. The words still felt strange coming out of my mouth. Unreal. Ethan let out a short laugh. Not a happy one. Mom, that doesn't make any sense. I felt my grip tighten on the phone. I know it sounds confusing, but no, I mean, it literally doesn't make sense, he interrupted. You worked at a library? When did you get involved in city development projects? I hesitated. I had an idea years ago, I said quietly. A proposal I submitted. And it got approved now. He asked, skepticism clear in his voice. I don't know, I admitted. That's why I think I should go. Just to see Mom. That one word. Firm. Cutting. I think you need to be careful here. My heart sank slightly. What do you mean? I mean, this sounds like one of those scams, he said. You know, official-looking letters, fake signatures, trying to get people to show up or give information. It had the mayor's name on it, I said. That doesn't mean anything, he replied quickly. People fake that stuff all the time. I frowned, glancing at the folded letter sitting in the drawer. It didn't ask for money, I said, or personal information. Not yet, he countered. There it was again, that tone, that quiet assumption that I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not naive, Ethan, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I didn't say you were, he replied, but the pause that followed suggested otherwise. I'm just saying, you should think this through before you go somewhere and embarrass yourself. The words landed harder than I expected. Embarrass yourself. Again. Like I was a child. Like I needed permission. Like my decisions weren't my own. I'm just going to attend a public event, I said. That's all. And what happens when they call your name and expect you to explain something you don't even understand? He pressed. What if it's all a misunderstanding and you're standing there in front of everyone? I closed my eyes for a second, because he had found it, my fear. The exact scenario that had been quietly sitting in the back of my mind since I opened that letter. I can handle that, I said softly. Can you? He asked. There was no cruelty in his voice this time, just doubt, and somehow that felt worse. Yes, I said more firmly now. Another pause, then he sighed. Mom, look, I'm just trying to protect you. I almost laughed. Protect me? From what hope? You don't need to protect me from going to a ribbon-cutting ceremony, I said. That's not what this is about, he replied, his voice tightening again. This is about you putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be disappointed. I swallowed. I've been disappointed before, I said quietly. He didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, I wondered if he remembered. If he thought about all the times I had stood by him, supported him, believed in him, even when things didn't go his way. But when he spoke again, it wasn't about that. Just don't expect too much, he said. Something in me shifted then, a small but noticeable change, because for the first time, I didn't feel like shrinking. I'm not expecting anything, I replied. I'm just going. Fine, he said shortly. Do what you want. The conversation was slipping. I could feel it. Ethan, I started, but he cut me off again. I've got to go, Mom. I'm in the middle of something. Of course he was. You always are, I thought, but didn't say. Okay, I said instead. Call me after, all right, he added, almost as an afterthought. Let me know how it goes. I will, I said. There was a brief silence. Then the line went dead. I stood there for a moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing, just the quiet hum of the empty line. I lowered it slowly, setting it back on the counter. For a few seconds, I just stood there staring at nothing. Then I walked back to the kitchen table and sat down. The same chair. The same place where everything seemed to happen lately. I pulled open the drawer and took out the letter again, smoothing it out in front of me. You should think this through. You might embarrass yourself. Don't expect too much. His words echoed in my mind, layered over my own fears, blending together until it became hard to tell which voice was his and which was mine. I stared at my name on the page. Faith Morrison. Clear. Unmistakable. Not a mistake. Not a maybe. Certain. And yet, why did it feel so uncertain? I thought about Rachel. The way she had looked at me during dinner, the quiet concern in her eyes, the way she had started to speak twice and stopped. I wondered what she would say now. If she were here. If she were sitting across from me at this table instead of Ethan. A small thought crossed my mind. I reached for my phone again, paused, then put it back down. No. This wasn't something I needed someone else to decide for me. Not Ethan, not Rachel, not anyone. This was mine. My choice, my risk, my moment. I looked at the clock on the wall. 2 days. Less now. Time was moving forward whether I was ready or not. And for once, I didn't want to stay still. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the drawer. Then I stood up, taking a slow breath. "I'm going," I said out loud, not to convince anyone else. Just myself. And this time, the words didn't feel uncertain. They felt steady, like the beginning of something. I didn't know what would happen on Saturday. I didn't know if I would walk away proud or humiliated. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sit at this table anymore wondering what might have been. Because somewhere deep inside me, that woman I used to be, the one who believed she had something to offer, she was still there, and she wasn't ready to disappear. Not yet. The morning of the event arrived faster than I expected. I woke up before my alarm. Not out of habit this time, but out of something else. Something restless. Something nervous. For a few seconds, I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what day it was. Then it came rushing back all at once. Saturday, 10 a.m., the ribbon. My stomach tightened. I sat up slowly, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. The house was quiet, just like every other morning. But today, the silence didn't feel quite as heavy. It felt watchful, like something was waiting. I stood in front of my closet longer than I care to admit, pulling out one blouse, then putting it back, holding up a dress, then shaking my head. It's strange how something as simple as choosing what to wear can feel so overwhelming when you're stepping into something uncertain. What if it's nothing? I murmured to myself. What if it's everything? Another voice whispered back. I let out a small breath and reached for a pale blue blouse, one Daniel had always liked. It wasn't new. It wasn't particularly fashionable, but it felt like me. I paired it with a simple skirt, brushed my hair back carefully, and applied just a touch of makeup. Not to impress anyone, just to remind myself that I was still here, still present, still someone. When I finally looked at my reflection, I didn't see the woman Ethan had described. I didn't see someone who didn't matter. I saw someone who had lived, who had loved, who had built a life full of meaning, even if others had forgotten it. That's enough, I said softly. I grabbed my purse, took one last glance around the house, and stepped outside. The drive to East Maple Street felt shorter than usual. Or maybe my thoughts were just louder. Every turn brought a new wave of doubt. Turn around. It's not too late. You don't belong there. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. I'm going, I said aloud again. The words steadied me. By the time I pulled onto East Maple, I could already see it. The building, new, modern, bright, but not cold like the renovated library. No, this place felt different, warmer, inviting. Large windows let sunlight spill inside, and there were people gathered outside, families, seniors, children, city officials. A small crowd. My heart began to pound. You can still leave, that voice whispered, but I didn't. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, staring at the entrance. A large banner stretched across the front. Oak Ridge Community Center, grand opening. Below it, rows of chairs had been set up facing a small stage. A red ribbon stretched across the front doors, waiting. For a second, I froze. Because suddenly, it felt real. Not just a letter, not just a possibility. Real. I stepped out of the car. The air was crisp, filled with the low hum of conversation and distant laughter. No one paid attention to me at first, and strangely that helped. I wasn't the center of anything. Not yet. I walked slowly toward the crowd, keeping my head slightly down, unsure of where I was supposed to go. Was there a check-in? A list. A mistake waiting to be corrected. Before I could decide, a voice called out behind me. Mrs. Morrison. I stopped. My heart skipped. I turned slowly. A man in his late 50s, dressed in a neat suit, was walking toward me with a smile. Polite. Warm. Familiar somehow. Yes, I replied, cautious. His smile widened. It is you, he said. Faith Morrison. I nodded, unsure. I'm sorry, do I? Howard Green, he said, extending his hand. Urban development. The name hit me immediately. My eyes widened slightly. You signed the letter, I said. I did, he confirmed, shaking my hand firmly. I've been hoping you'd come. I blinked. You were expecting me. He let out a soft chuckle. Of course we were. Something in his tone made my chest tighten again. Then this isn't a mistake, I asked carefully. His expression shifted, just slightly. Not confusion, not doubt. Something closer to surprise. No, ma'am, he said. Not even close. I felt the ground beneath me steady and shake at the same time. But I don't understand, I said. My proposal was rejected. Years ago. Howard's smile softened. Officially? Yes. My heart sank a little. I knew it, I murmured. But unofficially, he continued. I looked up. Unofficially, it never left the table. I stared at him. What do you mean? He gestured toward the building behind us. This place, it started with your idea. The world seemed to quiet around me. I read your proposal, he said. Years ago. I wasn't in this position back then, but I was part of the department. Junior staff? I searched his face, trying to place him, trying to understand. It stayed with me, he continued. The way you described it, a place where generations connect, where people don't just pass through, but belong. My breath caught. Those words. They were mine. I thought it was brilliant, he said simply. I shook my head, slightly overwhelmed. But it was rejected. By the council at the time, he clarified. Budget concerns, priorities, politics. Of course, things changed, he went on. New leadership, new vision. And when we started discussing community development again, I brought your proposal back. My heart began to race. You kept it. He nodded. I made a copy before it was archived. I couldn't let it go. I felt something rise in my chest. Not pain this time. Something warmer, stronger. And this I gestured toward the building, my voice trembling. This is a version of your vision, he said. Expanded, updated. But the core idea, that's yours. I looked at the building again. Really looked this time. The open spaces, the welcoming design, the people already gathering. And suddenly, I could see it. Not just the structure, but the purpose. It's real, I whispered. Howard smiled. It is. I felt my eyes sting. You should be proud, he added. Proud. The word felt foreign, unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. I thought it didn't matter, I admitted softly. He shook his head. Some ideas take time, he said. Yours just needed the right moment. I let out a shaky breath, and for the first time since that dinner, since those words, since everything had cracked open inside me, I felt something shift. Not completely, Not all at once, but enough. Enough to stand a little straighter, enough to breathe a little deeper, enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had never stopped mattering. I had just been waiting to be seen again. I didn't realize I had stopped breathing until I had to take a deep, shaky inhale. My idea, I repeated, barely recognizing my own voice. Howard nodded gently, as if he understood how difficult it was for me to accept. Yes, ma'am. Yours? The world around us seemed to blur for a moment, the chatter of the crowd fading into the background, the sound of children laughing somewhere in the distance becoming distant, almost unreal. Because all I could focus on, the world around us seemed to blur for a moment, the chatter of the crowd fading into the background, the sound of children laughing somewhere in the distance becoming distant, almost unreal. Because all I could focus on was that one sentence. This started with you. I turned slowly, my eyes tracing the building again. But this time, I wasn't seeing it as a stranger. I was seeing pieces of something I once imagined. The wide entrance with no steps accessible, welcoming. The large open windows letting in light, making the space feel alive. A side wing I hadn't noticed before, likely activity rooms. My chest tightened. I had sketches like this, I murmured. Howard smiled. I've seen them. That made me look at him again sharply. You have? He nodded. Your original proposal was detailed, thoughtful, ahead of its time, honestly. A strange mix of emotions rushed through me. Pride, disbelief, grief. Because if that was true, then what happened? Then why I began but couldn't finish? Why was it rejected? Why was I never told? Why did I spend years believing it didn't matter? Howard seemed to understand the question anyway. The council back then didn't see the long-term value, he said carefully. They were focused on immediate costs, budget limitations, political pressure. Of course, there was always something more urgent, something more practical. I swallowed, and after that it just disappeared, I asked. He shook his head. No, he said. Not completely. He gestured toward the building again. I kept a copy of your proposal. So did a few others who believed in it. It came up in discussions over the years quietly in the background. Quietly. In the background. The words echoed in my mind, just like me. And when the city finally secured new funding for community development, he continued, we needed a foundation, something meaningful, something that addressed real needs. His eyes met mine. Your proposal was the strongest one we had. I felt my throat tighten. But no one ever contacted me, I said. My voice wasn't accusing, just confused. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me there was more. We tried, he said, finally. My heart skipped. You tried? He nodded. Years ago, after your husband passed. Daniel, the name hit me like a quiet echo. I never received anything I said. I believe that he replied gently. Records from that period weren't well maintained. There were administrative changes, staff turnover. It's possible the outreach never reached you. Possible. Or maybe lost. Forgotten. Like everything else. I looked down at my hands, at the faint tremble that had never quite gone away. So I whispered, moved on. Howard didn't interrupt. He let the silence sit between us. And in that silence, something painful surfaced. All those years, all those quiet moments where I convinced myself that what I had created didn't matter, that it wasn't good enough, that I wasn't good and wasn't good enough, that I wasn't good enough. And all this time, it had been here, waiting. You should have known, he said softly. I let out a small, hollow laugh. Yes, I said. I should have. But the truth was and all this time it had been here, waiting. You should have known, he said softly. I let out a small, hollow laugh. Yes, I said. I should have. But the truth was, I had stopped believing there was anything worth knowing. Howard's voice pulled me back. There's something else, he said. I looked up. Something in his tone had changed. More serious, more deliberate. What is it, I asked? He glanced toward the stage where a few officials were beginning to gather. They're about to start, he said. But before they do, there's something you need to see. My heart began to race again. What do you mean? Come with me, he said. I hesitated for only a second. Then I followed. We moved through the edge of the crowd past rows of chairs and small clusters of people chatting. No one stopped us. No one questioned where we were going. It was as if I belonged there. That thought alone felt surreal. Howard led me toward the side of the building away from the main entrance. There was a quieter path there lined with small trees and newly planted flowers. This area wasn't part of the original design, he said as we walked. We added it later. Why, I asked. You'll see. We stopped in front of a wall. At first, it looked like any other part of the building, clean, modern, simple. But then I noticed the plaque. Small, brushed metal, mounted carefully at eye level. My breath caught. Go ahead, Howard said gently. I stepped closer. Each step felt heavier than the last, until I was standing right in front of it. I read the words once, then again, slower, making sure I wasn't imagining them. Oak Ridge Community Center, inspired by the original vision of Faith Morrison and dedicated to the memory of Daniel Morrison, who believed in that vision. The world tilted, not dramatically, not in a way that made me lose my balance, but enough that everything felt different. My name, there, permanent, not in a file, not in a forgotten proposal, but carved into something real, something lasting. My fingers lifted slowly, almost without thinking, brushing lightly against the cool surface of the plaque. Daniel, his name right beneath mine. He knew, I whispered. Howard stepped closer, his voice quiet. He did more than know, he said. He fought for it. I turned to him, my eyes searching. What do you mean? After your proposal was rejected, he didn't let it go. Howard explained. He contacted people, reached out to departments, tried to find alternative funding. My chest tightened painfully. He never told me that. Howard gave a small, understanding smile. I don't think he wanted to disappoint you if it didn't work. That sounded like Daniel, always protecting me, even from things I had the right to know. He kept submitting revisions. Howard continued. Updating the proposal based on feedback. Quietly, persistently. Tears blurred my vision. All those years, I whispered. Howard nodded. And when he passed, he added his voice softer. Now he left instructions. Asked that the project not be abandoned. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to hold something in, trying not to break apart right there. He believed in you, Howard said simply. The words hit me harder than anything else that morning, because for so long I had believed that belief died with him. But it hadn't. It had lived on. In documents, in people, in this building, in this moment. I stared at the plaque again, at our names, side by side, and suddenly, the years between then and now didn't feel empty anymore. They felt like a bridge, a long, quiet stretch of time where something was still growing, even if I couldn't see it. I thought it didn't matter, I said, my voice trembling. Howard shook his head gently. It mattered, he said, more than you knew. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the tears fall freely now. Not from pain this time, but from something deeper. Something that felt like being found. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. Not to the world, not to the past, not to the man I had loved, and maybe not even to myself. I don't remember walking back toward the main entrance. I only remember the feeling, like I was carrying something fragile inside me, something I didn't want to drop, didn't want to question too hard in case it disappeared. Daniel. His name stayed with me, not just as a memory anymore, but as something living, something that had continued quietly without me knowing. He fought for it. Those words echoed over and over in my mind. All those nights I thought he had simply accepted the rejection with me. All those years I believed we had both moved on, but he hadn't. He had stayed behind in that moment, holding on to something I had let go of. And somehow, he carried it forward, even after he was gone. I found myself back among the crowd before I realized it. People were taking their seats now, conversations settling into a low hum as anticipation began to build. I moved slowly, almost instinctively, toward an empty chair near the back. Not too close, not too visible. Old habits. But as I sat down, something felt different. For once, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't hiding because I felt small. I was simply taking it in. The stage stood ahead, simple but dignified. A podium at the center, a row of chairs behind it for city officials, and of course, the ribbon, bright red, stretched across the entrance, waiting. I stared at it for a long moment, and suddenly I wasn't seeing just a ceremony. I was seeing time. Years of it. Years I thought had been wasted. Years I thought had led nowhere. But now, they were all connected. Every late night at the library, every page I wrote, every moment I doubted myself. Even the rejection, even the silence. It had all led here. Faith. The voice startled me, soft, familiar. I turned. Rachel stood beside me. For a second, I just stared at her. You're here, I said. She smiled gently, though there was something cautious in her eyes. I was hoping you would be, she replied. I blinked. Ethan told you I asked. She has. Ethan told you I asked. He's it. Then shook her head. No, she said quietly. You told me. I frowned slightly. I did. She nodded. A while ago, she said, about the proposal, the community center idea. My chest tightened. I had forgotten that. Or maybe it hated. Then shook her head. No, she said quietly. You told me. I frowned slightly. I did. She nodded. A while ago, she said, about the proposal, the community center idea. My chest tightened. I had forgotten that. Or maybe I had dismissed it as one of those conversations people don't really remember. I didn't think you... I started, then stopped. Didn't think I was listening, she finished gently. I gave a small, embarrassed smile. I suppose not. Rachel sat down beside me. I was, she said, very much. There was a pause. Then she added softer. I thought it was one of the most beautiful ideas I'd ever heard. The words caught me off guard. Beautiful. No one had ever called it that before. Thank you, I said quietly. She glanced toward the building, then back at me. I'm glad you came, she said. So am I admitted. And for once, that wasn't just something polite to say. It was true. We sat there in silence for a moment, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable. Just full. But then I noticed something. You came alone? I asked. Rachel's expression shifted slightly. Just enough. Yes, she said. I nodded slowly. Of course. Ethan. A small part of me had wondered, hoped maybe. But I pushed that thought aside. This moment wasn't about him. Not yet. The event began with a series of introductions. Mayor Collins stepped up to the podium, welcoming everyone, speaking about community growth connection. His words were practiced, confident, but they carried something real beneath them. This center represents more than just a building, he said. It represents a commitment to every generation in this city, to making sure no one feels left behind. No one feels left behind. The phrase settled deep inside me, because for so long, that's exactly how I had felt. Left behind, forgotten, unseen. And today, the mayor continued, we honor the vision that helped make this possible. My heart began to beat faster. I felt it, that shift again, that moment where something was about to happen. Rachel's hand moved slightly, resting on mine. A quiet gesture. Support. Many years ago, the mayor said a proposal was submitted to the city. One that at the time was not fully understood. A few people in the crowd murmured softly. I sat very still. Time has a way of revealing the true value of an idea, he continued. And sometimes, the most important visions are the ones that take the longest to be realized. My throat tightened. Today, he said, his voice growing warmer, we recognize the woman who first imagined this place. My breath caught. This center exists because someone believed that people young and old should never feel invisible. My eyes filled with tears, because those were my words. Not exactly, but close enough to feel like they had been pulled straight from my heart. Faith Morrison, he said, looking out over the crowd. Would you please join us on stage? Everything went quiet. Not completely, but enough that I could hear my own heartbeat, loud, steady, unmistakable. I didn't move at first. I couldn't, because for a split second, I wasn't sure it was real. Then, Rachel squeezed my hand gently. They're calling you, she whispered. I nodded, slowly, carefully. I stood. The world seemed to narrow as I took my first step forward, then another and another. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood now what they meant, what this meant. I wasn't walking toward a stage. I was walking toward something I had lost and somehow found again. As I reached the front, Howard stepped forward, offering his hand to help me up the small set of stairs. Right this way, he said softly. I nodded, letting him guide me. The stage felt different from up there. Higher, brighter, exposed, but not in a frightening way, in a real way. I turned to face the crowd, and for the first time, I saw them. Really saw them. Not as strangers, but as people. People who had come together. People who would use this place. People whose lives might change because of something I once believed in. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. I didn't want to hide them. Not anymore. Because those tears weren't from pain. They were from recognition. From truth. From something finally being acknowledged. I looked down briefly. At my hands. At the tremble that was still there. But it didn't feel like weakness anymore. It felt like feeling. Alive, real. I lifted my gaze again, and that's when I saw him, standing near the back, half hidden behind a group of people. Ethan. My breath caught. For a moment, everything else faded. The crowd, the stage, the ceremony, all of it. It was just him, looking at me, not with impatience, not with distance, but with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Something uncertain, something shaken, something that almost looked like regret. And suddenly, I realized something. This moment wasn't just changing how I saw myself. It was changing how he saw me too. For a moment, I forgot where I was. All I could see was Ethan, standing there, still, watching me. Not the rushed, distracted man I had spoken to on the phone just days ago. Not the impatient son who told me I might embarrass myself. But someone quieter. Someone unsure. Someone who didn't quite recognize what he was seeing. And I realized neither did I. Because the woman standing on that stage, she wasn't the one he thought he knew. The mayor's voice pulled me back. "Mrs. Morrison," he said gently, stepping aside to give me space at the podium. "Would you like to say a few words? A few words?" I almost smiled, because there had been a time when I could speak easily, when words came naturally, when I knew exactly what to say. But now everything felt too full, too heavy, too important. I began, my voice catching slightly. I paused, taking a breath. The microphone amplified even the smallest sound, and suddenly I was aware of every eye in the crowd. Waiting, listening, expecting. I glanced down briefly at my hands, still trembling. But this time, I didn't try to stop it, because maybe this was what it meant to care. I looked up again. "My name is Faith Morrison," I said. A small, obvious statement, but it felt necessary. Like I was introducing myself not just to them, but to myself. "I didn't expect to be here today," I continued. A soft ripple of understanding moved through the crowd. And if I'm being honest, I almost didn't come. That earned a few quiet smiles. "I received the letter," I said, "and I thought it must be a mistake." My gaze drifted briefly across the crowd and found Ethan again. He didn't look away. I spent a long time believing that the idea I once had didn't matter. I went on. That it wasn't good enough. That it had been forgotten. The words felt heavier now, because I knew they weren't true, but I had believed them for so long. And I think... I paused, swallowing gently. I think a lot of us reach a point in life where we start to feel that way. The crowd was completely still now, listening, not just hearing me, feeling it. That maybe we've already done everything we were meant to do, I said. That the world has moved on and we're just trying to keep up? A few heads nodded, subtly. But enough. But standing here today, I continued, my voice gaining a little strength. I've realized something. I took a breath. Sometimes it's not that our ideas didn't matter. I let the silence sit for a second. It's that they needed time. The words settled over the crowd like something familiar, comforting, true. And sometimes I added, my voice softening again. We need time too. My eyes stung as I glanced toward the plaque in the distance, toward Daniel's name. I wasn't the only one who believed in this idea, I said quietly. There was someone who stood beside me, who saw it clearly, even when I couldn't. My voice trembled. But more importantly, he kept believing in it even after I stopped. The weight of that truth pressed gently against my chest. I didn't know that I admitted. Not until today. A tear slipped down my cheek, but I let it fall. I spent years thinking that moment had ended, I said, that what I had created had simply faded away. I shook my head slightly, but it didn't. I looked out at the building again, at the people, at everything this place would become. It was still here, I said, growing, changing, becoming something more than I ever imagined. My voice steadied. And that is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. There was a quiet pause. Then I added more gently, so if there's anyone here today who feels like they've been left behind, I let my gaze move across the crowd again, lingering, connecting. Please don't give up on the parts of you that once believed in something. The words felt like they came from somewhere deeper than I expected, because you never know when the world might be ready to catch up. A soft murmur of emotion moved through the audience. Not loud, but real. I stepped back slightly, my heart pounding, but something inside me felt lighter. Like I had just set something down, something I had been carrying for years. The mayor stepped forward again, his expression warm. Thank you, Mrs. Morrison, he said. That was exactly what we needed to hear. I nodded slightly, stepping back. But before I could fully retreat, he added, and now, if you would do us the honor. He gestured toward the ribbon. The red line stretched across the entrance, bright, waiting for me. My breath caught. For a second, I didn't move. Because this was it. The moment. The one I never imagined would exist. You're too old to matter anymore. The words echoed faintly. But this time, they sounded distant, small, untrue. I stepped forward. Howard handed me a pair of scissors. Simple, silver. But they felt heavier than anything I had held in a long time. I turned slightly, positioning myself in front of the ribbon. The crowd leaned in. Cameras lifted. People held their breath. And for a moment, everything went still. I glanced out one more time, and there he was, Ethan, closer now. Not hiding in the back anymore, standing where I could see him clearly. His expression had changed, completely. Gone was the doubt. Gone was the dismissal. In its place was something raw, something honest, something that looked a lot like realization. Our eyes met, and in that silent moment, I saw it. Not just surprise, not just regret, but understanding. The kind that doesn't come from words, the kind that comes from seeing something you didn't expect and realizing you were wrong. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about showing him he was wrong. It was about something else, something quieter, something stronger. I lifted the scissors, took a breath, and cut. The ribbon parted cleanly. A sharp, simple motion. But the sound that followed was anything but. Applause. Loud, warm, rising, filling the space around me. For a second, I just stood there, holding the scissors, listening, feeling. Not invisible, not forgotten, not too old, just present. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough. The applause didn't stop right away. It rolled through the crowd in waves, strong, warm, undeniable. For a moment, I just stood there, letting it wash over me. Not trying to shrink from it, not trying to explain it away, just receiving it. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't questioning whether I deserved to be seen. I simply was. Howard gently touched my arm. "Would you like to come inside?" he asked softly. I nodded, still a little dazed. The ribbon now hung in two loose pieces, drifting slightly in the breeze as people began to move forward. The doors opened, and the crowd slowly poured into the building. Into my building. That thought still felt impossible. And yet here I was. Rachel stayed close beside me as we stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, something shifted. The air inside felt different, lighter, alive, with quiet energy. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, filling the space with warmth. And suddenly, I wasn't standing in a new building. I was standing inside something I had once imagined. I moved slowly, almost reverently, as if I were afraid that moving too fast might break the moment. "This is incredible," Rachel whispered beside me. I nodded, unable to find words. To the left, I saw a large open reading area, comfortable chairs, shelves lined with books, small tables where people could sit together. My breath caught. "That was part of it," I said softly. Rachel turned to me. "Your idea?" I nodded again. "A place where people could read but also talk," I explained. "Where it didn't have to be silent to be meaningful." She smiled. "It feels exactly like that." We walked further in. To the right, there were activity rooms, glass walls revealing groups of people already gathering. A few children were painting, while an older couple sat nearby quietly working on something together. I stopped, watching. Because this was it. Not just a building, but a space where people who might otherwise feel alone didn't have to be. "You see it, don't you?" Howard's voice came from behind us. I turned. He stood there with a knowing expression. "Yes," I said simply. He nodded. "That's what we hoped." We continued walking, moving deeper into the center. Every corner seemed to hold something familiar, something I had once written down, once believed in. But there was something else, too. Something I hadn't expected. Laughter. Not forced, not polite. Real laughter. From people of all ages, together. And suddenly, I understood something. This wasn't just about me. It wasn't even just about Daniel. It was about all the people who would come here, all the lives that would intersect in this space, all the moments that would happen because this place existed. Faith. The voice stopped me in my tracks. I turned slowly. Ethan stood there, closer now. No longer hidden in the back, no longer distant, just there. For a second, neither of us spoke. Because what do you say after everything? He looked different, not physically, but in the way he held himself, less certain, less guarded. I didn't think he started, then stopped. I waited. "I didn't think it was real," he said finally. There was no defensiveness in his voice, no excuses, just honesty. I know, I replied gently. He nodded, looking down for a moment. I thought you were just holding on to something that didn't matter anymore, he admitted. The words echoed something he had said before, something that had hurt deeply, but now, they didn't land the same way. Sometimes I thought that too, I said. He looked up surprised. You did? I gave a small smile. For a long time. There was a pause, a quiet one. Not uncomfortable, just full. I'm sorry, he said. Simple, direct, real. The words hung between us. I could feel the weight of them, not just from today, but from everything, every moment of doubt, every careless word, every time he hadn't seen me. And yet, standing there inside this place, I realized something. I didn't want to hold on to that weight anymore. I know, I said softly, and I meant it. He swallowed. I shouldn't have said what I did, he continued. About you being too old to matter. The words sounded different coming from him now, like he finally understood what they meant. I looked at him carefully, at the man he had become, at the boy I had raised. You were afraid, I said. He blinked. Afraid I nodded. Afraid I would be disappointed, I explained. Afraid I would get hurt. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, he admitted. I was. And maybe, I added gently, a little afraid that you didn't really know me as well as you thought. That made him go still. Because that part was true. I didn't, he said quietly. There it was. Not denial, not deflection. Truth. I forgot. He continued, his voice softer now that you had a whole life before I understood any of it. My chest tightened slightly. Not from pain, but from recognition. That happens, I said. He looked at me again, really looked this time. I'm proud of you, he said. The words were simple, but they carried something new. Not obligation, not politeness, respect. And that mattered. Thank you, I said. We stood there for a moment longer, not rushing to fill the silence, not needing to, because something had shifted. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to start again. Rachel stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's arm. I told you, she said softly, a small smile on her face. She said softly, a small smile on her face. He gave a quiet laugh. Yeah, he admitted. You did. I watched them. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was standing outside of their world. I felt. He gave a quiet laugh. Yeah, he admitted. You did. I watched them. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was standing outside of their world. I felt included, part of it. Not as an obligation, but as someone who belonged. Come on, Howard called from across the room. There's one more thing I'd like to show you. I glanced at Ethan and Rachel. Together? I asked. Ethan nodded. Together. And just like that, we moved forward, not as strangers, not as people separated by misunderstanding, but as something closer, something rebuilding, step by step, inside a place that proved some things are never truly lost. They just wait until we're ready to find them again. We followed Howard down a quieter hallway away from the noise and excitement of the main gathering. The sound of laughter and conversation softened behind us, replaced by something calmer, something more intimate. This part wasn't in the original proposal, he said as we walked. I glanced at him. What is it? He smiled slightly. You see. The hallway opened into a smaller space. At first, it didn't look like much, just a simple room with soft lighting, a few chairs arranged in a circle, and a bookshelf along one wall. But then I noticed the details. Photographs, framed and carefully placed across the walls. Old ones, new ones, people of all ages, talking, smiling, listening, connecting, talking, smiling, listening, connecting. I stepped inside slowly. What is this place? I asked. Howard didn't answer right away. Instead, he let me take it in. Let me notice. Let me feel. Rachel moved beside me, her voice barely above a whisper. It feels... I stepped inside slowly. What is this place? I asked. Howard didn't answer right away. Instead, he let me take it in. Let me notice. Let me feel. Rachel moved beside me, her voice barely above a whisper. It feels different in here. She was right. It did. There was a quietness in this room, but not the lonely kind. The kind that invited you to speak, or to be heard. It's called the reflection room, Howard said, finally. I turned toward him. For what? Ethan asked, his voice softer now, as if he instinctively understood the need for quiet. Howard folded his hands in front of him. It's a space for people who need to talk, he explained. Or just sit. Or remember. My eyes drifted back to the photographs, and then I saw something that made my breath catch, one of the frames, near the center of the wall. I stepped closer, slowly, carefully, because somehow I already knew. It was a photo of Daniel. Not a formal one, not posed, but one I recognized instantly. He was standing in our old backyard, holding a stack of papers, laughing about something I couldn't remember now. But I remembered that moment. I remembered taking that picture. My hand lifted unconsciously, hovering near the frame. How did you get this? I asked, my voice barely steady. Howard stepped closer. Daniel submitted it, he said. My heart stopped. What? He nodded. Along with one of his final revisions, he continued. He included a note. I turned to him fully now. What note? Howard hesitated for just a second. Then he reached into a folder he had been carrying. I thought you might want to see it, he said. He handed me a single sheet of paper. Old, slightly worn, but preserved. My fingers trembled as I took it, because even before I read it, I recognized the handwriting. Daniel's. I swallowed hard and began to read. To whoever reads this, if you're looking at these plans, then it means this idea has survived longer than we expected. That doesn't surprise me, because it didn't come from me. It came from my wife, Faith. She won't tell you this herself, but she has a way of seeing people not just as they are, but as they could be if someone gave them a place to belong. This project was never just about a building. It was about giving people that place. If there's any part of this vision worth saving, it's because of her. And if it ever becomes real, please make sure she knows it mattered, because she will probably believe it didn't. Daniel Morrison. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I couldn't breathe, not because something was wrong, but because something inside me had just opened. All those years, all those quiet doubts, all those moments I told myself to let it go, and he had known. He had known I would believe it didn't matter, and he had tried, even then, to make sure I would one day see the truth. My hands shook as I lowered the paper. He wrote this, I whispered. Howard nodded. Yes. I pressed the paper gently against my chest, as if it might disappear if I didn't hold on to it. He never told me, I said. Rachel stepped closer, her eyes filled with emotion. Maybe he wanted you to find it like this, she said softly. I looked at her. What do you mean? She smiled gently. When it was real, she said. When you could finally see it. I swallowed, because that made sense. Painfully, beautifully. Ethan hadn't said anything. Not yet, but I could feel his presence beside me. Quiet, heavy, processing. I turned slightly. He was staring at the letter, at the photo, at everything. I didn't know any of this, he said quietly. His voice carried something new, not just surprise, but humility. I know, I replied. He shook his head slowly. I thought this was just some small thing you did a long time ago, he admitted. Something that didn't really go anywhere. The words weren't meant to hurt this time. They were honest. Raw. I thought that too, I said, gently. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was no distance between us. I was wrong, he said. Simple, direct. But this time, it went deeper than before. Because now, he wasn't just apologizing for what he said. He was acknowledging what he didn't understand. And that mattered. You didn't know, I said. He nodded slowly. But I should have, he replied. I should have asked. I should have listened. I studied his face, and I saw it. The shift. Not just in how he saw me, but in how he saw himself. I'm learning, he added quietly. A small smile touched my lips. So am I. We stood there together, the three of us in that quiet room, filled with memories and meaning. And for a moment, everything felt still, complete. Not perfect, but real. I looked back at Daniel's photo, at his smile, at the man who had believed in me even when I didn't. Thank you, I whispered, not out loud, but inside, because I knew somehow that he would hear it, and maybe, just maybe, he had known all along that this moment would come, that one day I would stand here, not wondering if I mattered, but knowing. We stayed in that room longer than I expected, longer than the event schedule probably allowed. But no one rushed us, no one interrupted. It was as if this space existed outside of time, where what mattered most was not the program, not the ceremony, but the quiet understanding unfolding between us. Eventually, the sounds from the rest of the building began to drift back in voices, footsteps, life continuing just beyond the walls. Howard glanced toward the hallway. There's one last thing, he said gently. I looked at him. There's more, I asked, half smiling through the emotion still lingering in my chest. He nodded. Just one more. We followed him again this time toward the back of the building. The hallway opened into a set of double doors. These weren't part of the original design either. He explained. Ethan reached forward and pushed one of the doors open. Sunlight flooded in, bright, warm, alive. I stepped outside slowly, and what I saw took my breath away. A garden, not a decorative one, not something designed just to be looked at, but something lived in, Paths curved gently through small flower beds and shaded seating areas. There were benches placed thoughtfully beneath trees, small tables where people could sit and talk, even a section where herbs and vegetables were growing. A community garden. I walked forward almost without thinking. My fingers brushed lightly against the leaves of a small plant. "It's beautiful," Rachel whispered behind me. "It's intentional," Howard corrected softly. I turned to him. "What do you mean?" He stepped beside me, looking out over the garden. "This space was inspired by something in your proposal," he said. I frowned slightly. "I don't remember writing about a garden." "You didn't call it that," he said, "but you wrote about giving people a place not just to gather, but to grow." My heart skipped. The memory came back slowly. A paragraph, one I almost didn't include, about creating spaces where people could feel part of something, not just by being there, but by contributing. "I remember," I said quietly. Howard nodded. "So we built it." I looked around again, at the people already walking through it, at a young boy helping an older man water plants, at two women sitting on a bench deep in conversation, at a group of teenagers laughing near the far corner. And suddenly, I saw it. Not just the garden, but the idea behind it: connection, belonging, growth. Not just physical, but emotional, human. I struggled to find the right word. "Alive," Ethan said beside me. I turned toward him. He was looking at the garden the same way I was, not casually, not distracted, but really seeing it. "Yes," I said softly. "It is." There was a quiet pause. Then he spoke again. "Mom." The word caught me off guard, not because he hadn't said it before, but because of how he said it now. Carefully, meaningfully. "I think I understand now," he said. I looked at him. "What do you understand?" He hesitated, searching for the words. "This wasn't just an idea," he said. "It was you." My chest tightened. Not painfully, but deeply. "What do you mean?" I asked gently. He gestured toward everything around us. "This place." He hesitated, searching for the words. "This wasn't just an idea," he said. "It was you." My chest tightened, not painfully, but deeply. "What do you mean?" I asked gently. He gestured toward everything around us. "This place, the rooms, the people, the way it all fits together," he said. "It's how you've always been." I felt my throat tighten. "You've always been the one who made space for people," he continued, "who noticed when someone felt left out, who tried to bring them in." Memories flickered through my mind. Small ones, quiet ones, helping neighbors, inviting people over, listening, always listening. "I never thought about it like that," I admitted. He gave a small, almost self-conscious smile. "I didn't either," he said. "Not until today." Rachel reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "You're seeing her clearly now," she said. He nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I am." I looked between them, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. Not to Ethan, not to anyone. Because this moment, this understanding, it wasn't something I had forced. It had come naturally, honestly. "I'm glad," I said simply. We walked a little further into the garden, moving slowly along one of the paths. There was a bench near the center, shaded by a tree that looked like it had been there for years. But it hadn't. It was new, just like everything else, and yet it already felt like it belonged. I sat down, carefully, taking it all in. Ethan and Rachel sat beside me, not too close, not too distant, just right. "This is going to change people's lives," Rachel said softly. I nodded. "I think it already has," I replied. Ethan glanced at me. "How?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Mine," I said. He didn't respond right away, but I could see it in his expression. He understood, because this wasn't just about a building. It wasn't just about an idea coming to life. It was about something deeper, something harder to explain. Rediscovery. Not just of purpose, but of self. For so long, I had defined myself by what I had lost. Daniel. The life we had built. The dreams that felt unfinished. And in that process, I had slowly let go of the parts of me that still existed. But today, those parts had come back. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to remind me that I wasn't done. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "You're different," Ethan said suddenly. I turned to him. "In what way?" He smiled slightly. "Stronger," he said, "but also lighter." I thought about that and realized he was right. "I think I stopped carrying something today," I said. "What?" he asked. I looked out at the garden again, at the people, at the life unfolding all around us. "The belief that I didn't matter anymore?" I said. The words felt final, not heavy, just true. Ethan nodded slowly. "I'm glad," he said. "So am I." We sat there for a while longer, not talking much, just being. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The sun had begun to soften by the time we left the garden. The sharp brightness of midday had faded into something warmer, gentler, like the day itself was slowly exhaling after everything it had held. People were still moving through the center, but the energy had changed. It was no longer the excitement of an opening. It was something steadier now. A rhythm. A beginning settling into reality. "I should probably head back inside," Rachel said, glancing toward the building. "They're starting some of the programs already." Ethan nodded. "I'll walk you," he said. She smiled at me before standing. "I'll find you in a bit," she added softly. I nodded. "Take your time," I said, and I meant it, because for the first time in years, I wasn't in a hurry to leave something meaningful behind. They walked off together, their voices low, their steps unhurried. I stayed on the bench, alone, but not lonely. The garden stretched quietly around me, alive in small, gentle ways, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of voices, the soft hum of something continuing. I leaned back slightly, letting the moment settle, and for the first time all day, I allowed myself to think about what came next. Not the ceremony, not the past, but the future. That word had felt distant for a long time, something I didn't quite belong to anymore. But now, it felt different, not overwhelming, not uncertain, just open. "Mind if I join you?" That word had felt distant for a long time, something I didn't quite belong to anymore. But now, it felt different, not overwhelming, not uncertain, just open. "Mind if I join you?" The voice came from my left. I turned. A woman stood there, probably in her early 60s, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "Of course," I said, shifting slightly to make space. She sat down beside me, smoothing her hands over her skirt as if grounding herself. "I heard your speech," she said. I smiled faintly. I hope it made sense, I replied. She let out a small emotional laugh. It made more than sense, she said. It felt like you were talking directly to me. That caught my attention. How so? I asked gently. She hesitated for a moment, then sighed. I used to be a teacher, she said. 30 years? That's a long time, I said. She nodded. It was everything to me, she continued. But after I retired, I didn't know who I was anymore. Her voice softened. My kids have their own lives. My husband passed a few years ago, and suddenly I felt like I had no place. The words hit close, too close. I understand that, I said quietly. She looked at me surprised. I didn't expect you to, she admitted. I smiled gently. I didn't expect it either, I said. We sat in silence for a moment, not heavy, just honest. I almost didn't come today, she said. My heart tightened slightly. I'm glad you did, I replied. So am I, she said, her eyes glistening. Because when you said that about not giving up on the parts of yourself that believed in something, she paused, taking a breath. It felt like permission, she finished. Permission. The word lingered. Because that's what I had needed too. Not validation, not recognition, just permission. To believe again, to start again, I said softly. She nodded. Yes. We sat there a little longer, talking quietly. Not about anything grand. Just small things. Her teaching years, my time at the library, the way life shifts when you don't expect it to. And as we spoke, I realized something. This was what the center was for. Not just the programs, not just the structure, but these moments, these conversations, these connections that might never have happened otherwise. Thank you, she said as she stood to leave. For what I asked, for reminding me that I'm not done yet, she said. I smiled. None of us are, I replied. She nodded, then walked back toward the building. I watched her go and felt something settle inside me, something steady, certain, because this place, it wasn't just a reflection of who I had been. It was part of who I was becoming. Mom, I turned. Ethan stood there again, alone this time. Rachel must have gone inside. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Better than okay, I said. He smiled slightly. Good. He sat down beside me, leaning forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just looked out at the garden. You know, he began slowly. I used to think success looked a certain way. I glanced at him. What way? He shrugged. Big achievements, promotions, recognition, things you could point to and say, that's it. That's what matters. I nodded. That's a common way to see it, I said. He gave a quiet laugh. Yeah, he admitted. But today I think I realized something. What's that? I asked. He looked at me. Success isn't always loud, he said. Sometimes it's quiet. His gaze shifted back to the garden. It's in the way people feel when they're around you, he added. In the way something you created continues even when you're not there to see it. My chest tightened slightly. Because he was describing something I hadn't been able to put into words. That's true, I said softly. He hesitated, then turned toward me again. I want to do better, he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. In what way I as Ked? He took a breath. In how I see you. He hesitated, then turned toward me again. I want to do better, he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. In what way? I asked. He took a breath. In how I see you, he said. In how I listen. In how I don't assume I know everything about your life just because I'm your son. I felt a small smile form. That would be a good start, I said. He smiled too. Yeah, he agreed. There was a pause. Then he added, and maybe I want to be part of this. I blinked slightly. This I asked. He gestured around us. The center, he said. Helping out? Volunteering? I don't know exactly how yet, but I want to be involved. Something inside me warmed. Not just because of what he said, but because of why he said it. Not obligation, not guilt, but understanding. I think that would be wonderful, I said. He nodded. Me too. We sat there together as the sun dipped lower in the sky, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was watching life from the outside. I felt like I was right where I was supposed to be. The sun was nearly setting when I finally stood up from the bench. The sky had softened into shades of gold and pale pink, stretching gently across the horizon, like a quiet ending to a long, meaningful day. But it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. Ethan walked beside me as we made our way back toward the building. Neither of us rushed. Neither of us needed to fill the silence. Because something between us had already been said. Something that didn't need words anymore. We stepped inside, and the center felt different now. Not new, not overwhelming, familiar. Like a place I had known for years, even though I had just arrived. People were settling into programs, small groups gathered in rooms, quiet conversations, unfolding laughter echoing softly from down the hall. Life had already begun here. Real life. And somehow I was part of it. I think they're closing up soon, Ethan said, glancing around. I nodded. That makes sense. We walked slowly toward the entrance, and just before we reached the doors, I stopped. I want to come back, I said. The words surprised even me, not because I didn't mean them, but because of how easily they came. Ethan smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. I looked at him. I think I'd like to volunteer, I added. Help with the reading programs, maybe the reflection room. He nodded immediately. You'd be perfect for that. A small laugh escaped me. I used to think I was, I said. He shook his head gently. I think you still are. We stepped outside together. The air was cooler now, the evening settling in. Cars were pulling out of the parking lot, people heading home. But I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was carrying something with me. Something steady. Something real. Ethan walked me to my car, and for a moment we just stood there, not quite ready to say goodbye. I meant what I said earlier, he said. I looked at him. About wanting to do better, he continued. I don't want to go back to how things were. I studied his face. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just sincerity. I don't either, I said. He nodded. Then we won't, he replied. Simple, but meaningful. He hesitated, then stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. Not the quick, distracted hug from before, not the half-hearted gesture. This was different, full, present, real. I closed my eyes, returning the embrace, and for a moment, I felt it, that connection, the one I thought had been lost. Not gone, just waiting. When we pulled back, there was something softer in his expression. Drive safe, he said. I will, I replied. He smiled, then stepped back. I got into the car, closing the door gently behind me. For a moment, I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing, feeling. Then I glanced up through the windshield. At the building, the lights inside glowed warmly now, illuminating the spaces where people were still moving, still connecting, still beginning something new. My name wasn't visible from here. The plaque was somewhere around the side. Quiet, unseen. But I didn't need to look at it, because I knew it was there. And more importantly, I knew what it meant. I started the car. The engine hummed softly to life. And as I pulled out of the parking lot, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was moving forward. For the first time in a long time. With purpose. With clarity. With something that felt like peace. The drive home was quiet, but not empty. My thoughts moved gently, not racing, not tangled, just settling. I thought about Daniel, about the way he had believed in me, about the way he had carried that belief forward even when I couldn't. And for the first time, I didn't feel the sharp edge of El As when I thought of him. I felt about the way he had believed in me, about the way he had carried that belief forward, even when I couldn't. And for the first time, I didn't feel the sharp edge of loss when I thought of him. I felt gratitude, because his belief hadn't just supported me then, it had brought me here, to this moment, to this understanding, and somehow that made everything feel connected. I pulled into my driveway just as the last light of day faded from the sky. The house stood quietly in front of me, the same as it had always been. But I wasn't the same. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The familiar silence greeted me, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt peaceful. I walked into the kitchen, to the table, Daniel's table, and this time, I didn't see it as a reminder of what I had lost. I saw it as part of what had carried me here. I ran my hand gently across the surface, tracing the same marks, the same memories. But now, they didn't feel like the past. They felt like part of my story, a story that wasn't finished, not even close. I sat down, letting out a slow breath, and for a moment, I simply existed, not questioning, not doubting, just being. You're too old to matter anymore. The words came back one last time, but they didn't land. They didn't echo. They didn't stay. Because now I knew the truth. Not because someone told me, not because a city recognized me, but because I had lived it, felt it, understood it. I smiled softly, shaking my head just a little. No, I whispered into the quiet room. I'm not. And for the first time, I didn't need anyone else to believe it, because I already did. Sometimes the hardest part of growing older isn't the years themselves. It's the quiet feeling that the world has moved on without you, that your time has passed, that what you once gave, your work, your love, your ideas, has already been used up and set aside. But the truth is, meaning doesn't expire. Purpose doesn't disappear. And the things you create, whether it's a place, a moment, or even the way you treat people, have a way of living on far beyond what you can see. Faith's story isn't just about recognition. It's about rediscovery. About realizing that value isn't measured by how loudly the world acknowledges you, but by the impact you've had, quietly, consistently over time. And sometimes, the world doesn't forget you. It just takes a little longer to catch up. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered whether you still matter, let this be your reminder. You do, in ways you may not even realize yet. So don't give up on the parts of yourself that once believed in something, because they might still be building something beautiful somewhere you haven't looked yet. And when the moment comes, you'll see it, just like Faith did. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? What time is it there right now? And have you ever had a moment where you realized you mattered more than you thought? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe in stories that remind us of our worth, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes we all need to be reminded.